not all plot twists can be quite so great. Sometimes they have the opposite effect and call the entire movie's logic into question, which isn't a good thing. And then there are those plot twists that, good or bad, simply weren't predicted by anyone. They came swinging so wildly out of left field that everyone was caught off guard, for better or for worse. You in here, this is Whatculture, and here are just a few recent movie plot twists nobody saw coming. First up, Clark's parents wanted him to conquer Earth. Superman. James Gunn's Superman isn't a film that many expected to have a genuinely jolting plot twist, and yet, here we are. At the start of the film, we see Superman, David Corenswet, being soothed with a message from his Kryptonian birth parents, Jor-El and Lara Lorvan, played by Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian, respectively. However, said message was damaged during transit to Earth, and later on, Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor has the missing passage of the message restored, where Clark's parents implore him to conquer Earth and take many wives to rebuild the Kryptonian race. Now, at first, many might assume that Luthor has doctored the remains of the message to help turn public opinion against the Man of Steel. But in a particularly ballsy move, Gunn makes pains to point out that there are no shenanigans afoot, and the message is 100% legit. Yeah, it's certainly a reveal that left many superfans upset, including me, because I think we've already done that with the Batman the other year or whatever. It did also do a great job of bolstering one of the film's central themes, that Clark became a beacon of hope because of how he was nurtured by his Earth parents, the Kents. So, to that end, it works pretty well, although I do think we've kind of maybe hit peak capacity on evil origins for parents and comic book movies. I don't know, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Next up, Jasper Briggs is Jim Phelps' son. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Considering that Mission Impossible filmmaker Christopher McQuarrie vocally decried the excess of fan service in modern franchise cinema, it is a bit baffling that he committed a lamely fan-serving sin of his own in the series' most recent and apparently final entry. Midway through Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, we learn that Shea Whigham's Jasper Briggs, the US intelligence agent who has been pursuing Ethan Hunt and his team for the past 2 films, is actually really named Jim Phelps Jr., as in he's the son of Jim Phelps from the original TV show, who was then played by Jon Voight, the IMF leader from the original Mission Impossible movie, who was controversially revealed to be the film's surprise antagonist back when it debuted in the 90s. It was definitely a surprising reveal, though less because it made sense and more because it came so wildly randomly out of left field. More to the point, the rest of the film does so little with it and Phelps Jr. as a character that you really have to wonder why McQuarrie bothered at all, especially in a film that's already so excessively bloated with subplots and characters. Next up, Virginia dies in the opening scene. Happy Gilmore 2. Happy Gilmore 2 didn't exactly seem like a movie that needed a jolting twist to kick things off, and yet the belated comedy sequel began with the shock death of Happy's beloved wife Virginia, played by Julie Bowen of Modern Family fame. In its opening montage sequence bringing us up to speed on Happy's life over the last near 30 years, we learn that Julie was killed in a freak golfing accident when Happy accidentally hit her in the head with one of his golf balls. And because that's not horrifying enough, it also happened on Mother's Day. More like sad Gilmore, am I right? Given that Virginia was a well-liked character from the first film, who many were looking forward to seeing again in Happy Gilmore 2, there was considerable surprise and disappointment that she got the axe quite so blatantly. The marketing certainly didn't hint at this happening at all, and so it caught just about everyone off guard. Either way, it just felt like a trite and somewhat unimaginative way to introduce conflict for Happy, basically treating his wife and the mother of his children like a disposable plot device. And I know Happy Gilmore 2 is not meant to be high art, but this still kinda just stunk. Next up, Anais is Edith, the Accountant 2. The Accountant 2 is a decidedly sillier and more fun film than its predecessor, but even so, its big plot twist is so cartoonishly ridiculous that it stretches the story's internal credibility to near breaking point. In the sequel's very first scene, we meet an assassin called Anais, played by Daniela Pineda, who is tasked with helping locate a Salvadorian family pictured in a photograph. But the big old rub is that this character actually is the mother shown in said photo, called Edith, who was involved in an accident, lost her memories, and woke up with a case of acquired savant syndrome, allowing her to quickly become a ruthless, self-taught assassin. As for why she looks so different from Edith, well, she also had facial reconstructive surgery following the accident, inexplicably making her look completely different while having no visible surgery scars or marks whatsoever. It's deeply, deeply silly, and though the film doesn't take itself particularly seriously, it's still a major ask of the audience to accept something so fundamentally just bizarre. Frank Drebin Sr. becomes an owl, The Naked Gun. Beyond the genuine plot twist of the recent reboot of The Naked Gun actually being good, it had one more big surprise in store. A cameo from original protagonist Frank Drebin, who was of course played by the legendary Leslie Nielsen. The film as a whole seems to relish making fun of lazy, mawkish legacy sequels, and while another filmmaking team might have strained to give the late great Nielsen some sort of garish cameo via ghoulish AI deepfake shenanigans, filmmaker Akiva Schaffer ultimately came up with something far better. Instead, Frank Drebin Sr. reappears in the film's climax in the guise of an owl who helps airlift his son, Frank Jr., played by Liam Neeson, to safety and helps him foil the villain Richard Kane. And yeah, apart from just being really, really funny, it's also a fittingly absurd riposte to legacy sequels and their obsession with raking back over past glories in regularly tacky fashion. Because who in their right mind expected Frank Drebin Sr. to be reincarnated as an owl? Eric isn't a blood relative. Final Destination Bloodlines. If you thought the Final Destination franchise couldn't come up with a better twist than the previous films, it's actually a prequel surprise, well, the team behind Final Destination Bloodlines tried their level best to get one over on audiences once again. After protagonist Stephanie's uncle Howard dies, the next family member in Death's firing line is assumed to be Howard's eldest son, Eric. However, just when it seems like Eric is going to be brutally killed off at the tattoo parlor where he works, he actually manages to survive, and it's instead his sister Julia who perishes next, courtesy of a trash compactor. As the traumatized and confused family tries to make sense of it, Eric's mother Brenda, played by April Tellick, breaks the news that Eric was actually the product of an affair and not Howard's biological son. Of course, this means that Eric was never on Death's list to begin with, which seemingly makes him safe. It was one hell of a clever way to flip the script, even if Eric still ended up suffering a death by MRI machine when he tried to stop Death from claiming his half-brother Bobby, played by Owen Joyner. Pete wins, but not Ray, The Long Walk. The recent adaptation of Stephen King's dystopian novel The Long Walk is extremely faithful to the tone of the source material, though it takes some unexpected liberties with the plot at the very end. Readers of the book will know that protagonist Ray Garrity, here played by Cooper Hoffman, wins the titular endurance trial after his pal Pete McVrees, played by David Johnson here, lamely sits down and accepts his fate, and the seemingly unstoppable Billy Stebbins, played by Garrett Waring, suddenly falls over dead. But the film deviates sharply from this ending by having Stebbins give up, before Ray decides to sit down and die, leaving Pete the surprise winner instead. And while the novel ended ambiguously with Ray walking past the Major, here played by Mark Hamill, and jogging off into the night, here Pete shoots the Major dead with a rifle and walks off to parts unknown. The ending is certainly still effective, but some nevertheless felt that the changes from the source were unnecessary, and in the case of Pete's execution of the Major, a little bit too Hollywood by comparison. Harry had leg lengthening surgery. Materialists. Celine's song's Materialists was marketed as a relatively breezy romantic dramedy, and so few were expecting it to be quite so weird, but weird it was. Matchmaker Lucy, played by Madam Web herself, Dakota Johnson, spends the film pulled between the romantic interest of her working-class ex John, played by Chris Evans, and the slick, suave, wealthy Harry, played by Pedro Pascal. In many respects, Harry seems too good to be true. He's handsome, rich, charming as hell, he's Pedro Pascal, and it means that he could offer Lucy one hell of a sweet life. And then the mid-film twist drops, that Harry isn't quite so perfect, or rather, he wasn't born that way. Lucy notices a scar on Harry's leg before he reveals that he's had leg lengthening surgery to add 6 inches to his height, to the eye-watering cost of 200,000 smackaroos. Harry insists that this changed his life for the better, and though it doesn't change how Lucy feels about him, and nor should it really, it does make her realize that she viewed him less as a love interest than a box-checking exercise, prompting them to then break up. It's a twist that tap dances on the fringes of absurdity, though considering the surgery is very much real and has been on the rise in the last 5 years, the film can just about get away with it. Naru is in stasis. Predator, Killer of Killers. Predator, Killer of Killers was a damn fun time and had quite the unexpected zinger in store for fans of the series' previous live-action film, Prey. At the end of the film, Viking warrior Ursa, played by Lindsay Lavanchi, sacrifices herself to let Ronin Kenji, played by Louis Ozawa Changchen, and American soldier John, played by Rick Gonzalez, escape from the Predator planet they're being kept on. Ursa is recaptured by the Predators and put back into stasis, where she's revealed to be stored alongside Naru, played by Amber Midthunder, the protagonist of Prey. While some fans maybe felt that this epilogue undercut the ending of Prey by revealing that Naru just got captured afterwards, it was nevertheless a fun and unexpected way to suggest she'll be back in a future installment. And almost 2 months after Killer of Killers was released, an extended epilogue was added to the film, revealing that Ursa and Naru were in stasis alongside Dutch and Mike, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny Glover, the protagonists of the original 2 Predator movies. Though it remains to be seen what this could all be leading to, it's certainly neat to see Dan Trachtenberg bringing the series' most disparate characters closer together. The Masked Man is the meter guy, Drop. The recent horror thriller Drop revolves around a woman, Violet, played by Megan Fahey, who is terrorized by anonymous airdrop messages threatening her family. And the culprit is eventually revealed to be Richard, played by Reed Diamond, a man who intends to assassinate her date Henry, played by Brandon Sklenar. But then there's the matter of the masked henchman who assists Richard by heading to Violet's house and taking her son Toby, played by Jacob Robinson, and sister Jen, played by Violet Bean, hostage. In the finale, Violet heads home to take on the henchman, who removes his ski mask in a manner that suggests the audience is supposed to recognize his actual face. Yeah, he's the most generic looking dude imaginable, no offense, and resembles at least 3 other characters we meet during the film. As it turns out though, the guy is actually the man who read Violet's electric meter at the very start of the film. But because the guy was on screen for literally 10 seconds and had a completely unremarkable, unmemorable face, the big reveal at the end falls hilariously flat, ultimately leaving many totally confused. Though spoon-feeding the audience is often a bad thing, in this case it actually would have been smart to show maybe a quick flashback to the meter reading scene just for the sake of clarity. Lena is Eve's sister, Ballerina. John Wick's spin-off Ballerina definitely isn't a film that needed a twist, like, at all, but hey, they just slapped it on there anyway. During the movie, we're eventually introduced to Lena, played by Catalina Sandino Moreno, a high-ranking member of the assassin cult led by the villainous Chancellor, played by Gabriel Byrne. Now, given that Moreno is an Oscar-nominated actress, it was reasonable to assume that she'd have a major role to play. But even so, it's revealed basically totally out of nowhere that she's actually the sister of protagonist Eve, played by Ana de Armas. Twinless. The twist is fielded out in strangely half-assed fashion, as though even the filmmakers didn't really believe in it, before Lena swiftly dies a few minutes later and doesn't even get much of a meaningful interaction with her sibling sister at all. Considering how much has been written about Ballerina's extensive reshoots, it's easy to believe that this plotline was hastily introduced in post-production in order to maybe shoehorn some added emotional resonance to Eve's story. Doesn't quite work though in practice. Dennis lied about having a twin and got Rocky killed. Twinless. James Sweeney's terrific new black comedy Twinless was marketed as a film about two young men, Roman and Dennis, played by Dylan O'Brien and Sweeney respectively, who become codependent friends after meeting at a support group for twinless twins, each of them grieving the death of their own twin. But Sweeney's film is full of unexpected twists and turns that are doled out over the course of its runtime. In the first act, we learn that Dennis was actually romantically involved with Roman's twin brother Rocky, and more to the point, he was inadvertently responsible for Rocky's death, angrily calling him into traffic where he was hit and killed by a car. Since then, Dennis has effectively been stalking Roman, and to somehow make it even worse, it's later confirmed that Dennis never had a twin, simply fabricating the story so he could attend the support group and get close to Roman. It's deliciously twisted stuff, and executed with incredible tonal mastery by Sweeney, at once delivering on the compelling promises of the trailer, but also offering so much more. Sarah was a honey trap. Relay. David Mackenzie's mostly great new crime thriller Relay revolves around Ash, played by Riz Ahmed, a fixer who serves as a go-between for whistleblowers and the companies they expose. His latest case, though, sees him trying to help whistleblower Sarah Grant, Lily James, safely escape the reach of a corporation whose misdeeds she'd planned to expose. In the third act, Sarah is kidnapped by agents working for the corporation, and after Ash, who is now also romantically interested in Sarah, races to rescue her, she ends up tasering him. It is then revealed that Sarah is actually the leader of the operatives, and the entire whistleblower story was false. It was actually all part of a complex sting operation cooked up by the corporation to trap Ash because of a previous whistleblower he helped escape. Effectively, Sarah was used as a honey trap to lure Ash out, force him to let his guard down, and then capture him. Though it's an interesting and unexpected twist, it's also howlingly convoluted and so falls apart under even the slightest scrutiny, which reminds me a lot of an old Kevin Costner and Gene Hackman movie No Way Out, where a similar end twist happens that kind of just ruins the movie. But hey, the rest of Relay though, pretty good time. You should probably go watch it if you can get past the twisty nonsense. Todd dies. Good boy. The tragic irony of the recent indie horror hit Good Boy is that audiences got so preoccupied worrying over the fate of the central canine, Indy, that they didn't spare much thought for the film's human protagonist Todd, played by Shane Jensen. Now, the pre-release discourse surrounding the movie largely consisted of folks expressing interest in the film but not wanting to watch one where a dog dies, enough that some outlets flat out spoiled the dog's fate in their reviews, which, come on, that's not cool. But yet, obviously, Indy does not die, just for the avoidance of all doubt. In a devastating final twist, though, Indy's owner Todd sadly succumbs to the supernatural entity pursuing him throughout the film, which can be interpreted as a metaphor for the debilitating chronic lung disease he suffers with throughout the story. Seeing Indy unable to help his owner and instead be forced to accept his death ends the film on one hell of a heart-wrenching note. Just not the one a lot of people expected when that adorable old mutt was in the mix. MG is the killer. Honey, don't. Ethan Cohen's new neo-noir Honey Don't sees private detective Honey O'Donoghue, played by Margaret Qualley, investigating the deaths of several women connected to a church operated by the lecherous Reverend Drew Devlin, played by Chris Evans. But as vile as Devlin is, he actually isn't the film's killer. At the very end of the story, we learn that the person responsible is MG Falcone, who, in addition to being a cop, is also Honey's lover. As it turns out, MG, played by Aubrey Plaza, was a victim of abuse at the hands of her father and ultimately killed him. Her trauma seemingly driving her insane enough that she decided to murder women who took comfort in the church for their perceived quote-unquote weakness. This revelation leads an incensed MG to try and kill Honey as well, who is in turn forced to kill her. Whether this left field twist worked for you or not, as like the movie as a whole, it's certainly been quite divisive, few definitely saw it coming. It was Moretti's plan all along. Opus. A24's rather disappointing new horror Opus revolves around a journalist Ariel, played by Ayo Edebiri, who is invited to the remote compound of a legendary reclusive pop star called Alfred Moretti, played by John Malkovich, to sample his long-awaited new album. It rather predictably transpires that Moretti is operating a cult from his home, and in the finale encourages his followers to perform mass suicide by chugging down some poisoned champagne. Ariel is almost force-fed the drink herself until a sympathetic follower frees her, after which we cut to a 2 years later epilogue. Ariel has since written a book about her experience and pays a visit to an imprisoned Moretti. Then Moretti drops the shock twist. The mass suicide was a hoax and everyone who died is still alive, having blended into society at various levels with a plan to keep spreading his teachings. And more to the point, Moretti always intended for Ariel to survive, knowing she'd write a book about it and inadvertently spread word of Moretti's story to the masses. Now, on one hand, the film is clearly trying to indict society and its obsession with gawking at monsters, but the immensely contrived nature of Moretti's oh-so-perfect plan makes it feel a bit too smug and mustache-twirling for its own good. Yvonne dies early, caught stealing. It was quite understandably assumed that Zoe Kravitz would have a major role in Darren Aronofsky's new crime thriller Caught Stealing, given that she was featured prominently in the film's trailers and was effectively promoted as the female lead. And while Kravitz appears throughout the first act as Yvonne, the love interest of protagonist Hank, played by Austin Butler, things take a sudden dark turn soon thereafter. Once Hank finds himself on the wrong side of the vicious Drucker brothers, played by Vincent D'Onofrio and Liev Schreiber, he realizes that Yvonne is also in danger, but upon racing back to her apartment to check on her, he finds that she's been fatally shot in the head. As major character deaths go, it's completely unceremonious and unsentimental, kind of Friedkin-esque. Yvonne doesn't get any dying words while bleeding out, and she's just gone before Hank even gets there. It's a brilliantly effective turn, and one that solidifies the life or death stakes for Hank, who at least manages to get brutal revenge on the Druckers by killing the duo at the film's ending. Ray is the killer. I Know What You Did Last Summer. The legacy sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer was proof positive that just because a twist is shocking does not make it effective or even basically logical. We eventually learn that the hook-wielding killer is Stevie, played by Sarah Pidgeon, who embarked on a killing spree in revenge for the accidental death of her boyfriend Sam. But once Stevie has apparently been killed, it's revealed that she had an accomplice. One of the original film's survivors, Ray Bronson, played by Fred Jones himself, Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah, Ray claims that he decided to help Stevie because he was frustrated at the town of Southport attempting to erase the original killings from its history in order to gentrify the town and boost tourism. A traumatized, infuriated Ray wanted Southport to never forget what happened, and while this twist was certainly one hell of a bold swing, it's really bad. Yeah, let's just say that there's a good reason that Scream has never done this with one of its OG characters, because it would be thoroughly jumping the shark, just as Ray's reveal was here. It's all about eye fluid, the home. The latest horror film from the Purge director James DeMonaco revolves around Max, played by Pete Davidson, a former foster child and graffiti artist who is arrested for vandalism and sentenced to community service at a retirement home. Before long, Max begins to notice some incredibly strange goings-on at the facility, and while we're very clearly being led to some sort of Get Out-esque scenario, the particulars of it are much more surprising. In the end, it's revealed that both the staff and residents of the retirement home are part of a cult that worships the goddess Dea. So far, so freaky, but they also kidnap young people and extract a liquid from behind their eye that they call Dea's nectar, allowing them to extend their lives and remain youthful for longer. Given that The Home is a relatively dull, forgettable horror flick up to this point, the utterly bonkers swing is actually really cool, especially as it leads to Max embarking on a bloodthirsty rampage against staff and residents alike. It's not enough to push the film into genuinely good territory, but hey, it has given me a new fear. There is someone out there who wants to steal my eye juice. In which case, please don't.